Good evening, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eve Prosper Market Show. I'm your host, Lockefox, and we're going to talk about all things Eve market and industry here that's happened in the last week. I'm going to go ahead and go straight into the show notes. First, as always, let's talk about the show for just a moment. We've just started Ashtarothi from Hydrostatic and Hydrag has just started up a new Tweet Fleet Slack server. We use Slack and Aderon Robotics as our chat channel, and it's really great if your corp is big and needs a communication platform. It's an excellent alternative to Jabber. The way it works, though, we have to give people invites. So drop me a line on the tweet fleet at HLibIndustry, and I'll make sure you get an invite. That's where I'm going to be hosting the chat channel for the Prosper community, because I'm harder to get in touch with in-game, and that's a much better way for me to talk with you guys. Number two, we've basically kicked off CSM season with a bunch of the campaigns already starting. I'd like to point people to friends of the show at Capstable are doing an amazing job interviewing as many candidates as they can get their hands on. And I'm also going to be running a Prosper approved vote ticket, which we'll talk about at the end of the show. So keep tuned for that. Probably going to be like 6 people on that. So if you have suggestions, we'll talk about that at the end of the show. So let's move on to actual game news really quick. If you didn't catch it, today was the semi-monthly 07 news show from CCP where they talk about things that are on the horizon. And it was some interesting news. I haven't had a chance to watch it because, unfortunately, it airs while I'm at work and Twitch is blocked, so I can't really watch it. But let's talk about some of the things they talked about. First, they released some concept art for the new T3 Destroyer. It's going to be the Minmatar race. Unfortunately, they didn't tease anything else out. No name, no slot layout, no intended use. Is it going to have exactly the same speed, tank, snipe setup? Probably, but we'll see where this goes. It was a cool piece of art, and it's up on the Eve Reddit too, so if you wanted to go take a closer look and start your theory crafting. The next piece, at least I found interesting, is there's talking about doing the ship skinning on an account level. So you'd be able to skin you'd be able to buy a skin for a ship. So in this case, they show a Megathron, and you would buy the skin once, and then anytime you wanted to have it on, you would just apply it to the hull, and it would be it wouldn't count any extra on the kill mail. This is a extremely beta look. This is probably not at all what it's going to look like. But I have to thank Zerali Onzo, excuse me, for getting the screenshot for me. And they really need to think up a new name because they were getting a little too witty with the names, calling it a super Kerr induced nano coating so that it spells out skin, and that's kind of lame, and you should yell at them about that. The last couple pieces of news are and the last piece they covered on the '07 show was a change to corporation setup where you can turn on or off the ability to shoot corp mates at a corp level. So this should allow people to turn off AWOXing of corp members. So if you're in a high-sec corp, it might be a really good idea to leave that box turned off. I didn't catch what the default is going to be. I don't know the mechanics around what it's going to take to turn it off and on. As I get information, I'll report it. Moving on, there were a couple other little pieces of news that I caught. One being the Circadian Sleepers, which Johnny Pugh on his site had a pretty interesting little blurb about them. He was talking about how they're flying through space, scanning things, and they generally don't shoot players. But it seems that they have become more aggressive since the latest Proteus patch. It's going to be... The thing to note is that not only will they shoot back in combat, but they will follow you through warp, and they will pod you. So be careful out there. Don't get accidentally podded. We'll see how this ends up going. I'm a little wary of that sort of change, NPCs podding people. But after the change to med clones, I can sort of see why they're doing it. It's going to be an interesting piece of news to follow. And then the last piece of news is to go tune into Capstable for CSM interviews. It's important to understand who's running and their platforms and what it means. So be sure to check out those interviews. Moving on, let's start talking about the market. And as I said last week with Plex, that it was acting exactly as I had predicted, that on the 1st we started an upward trend. It has been largely flat for the last week. This is contrary to my original prediction. I was expecting us to keep heading up on a line towards 850, to be in the high 830s, low 840s this week. The flattening is premature in my opinion. We should expect to see a flattening in the spring in like April or maybe early May, but we should be seeing a smooth growth pattern up through March is my expectation. So Plex is flat. It's actually kind of be the theme of the forced analysis stuff I do this week, is that a lot of things just kind of stayed flat. Also, it's worth noting that the volumes have been a little uncharacteristically low. I'm not sure if this is because people are going back to school or what's going on. We're a little anemic at the moment. I expect us to start ticking up over the next week. Moving on, let's start talking about minerals. And minerals are going to be flat. This is pretty much the same graph you're going to see for everything. Is titanium's flat, pyrite is flat, Mexilon is down very slightly, but it's recovered in the last day. Getting over to isogen, though, we're starting to see a little of instability, though we just seem to be pivoting around the 125 mark. So if we start heading up to 130, that's when I'll start getting concerned. This one I expect to be coming down is my general gut feeling on this one. Noxium has trended up slightly, which I think is weird. I think most of the low ends should be trending down. So this one might be artificially high at the moment. And then Zydrene and Megasite both took big dives, and this is what I had been saying even since the IS Boxer ban, is that we expect, if things are running normally, to be oversupplied in low ends and oversupplied in high ends, undersupplied in low ends. This ends up being because of the weight of moving as much trit and pyrite as you need to go do industry. That ends up being the limiting factor for how much can actually be moved or be taken to market. And then if you are mining in nullsec, for instance, to like feed a capital chain, you might be mining all of the trit you need, but then you've got 8 or 9 times as much low ends as you need to consume. So you'll be exporting those low ends. Even with the IS Boxer bans and our expectation that mining ISK per hour should go up, I do still expect Zydrene and Megasite to go down, and I also expect Noxium to take a pretty steep dive this next week, but we'll see if I eat those words. So let's look at Megasite. Megasite is down very slightly, but it didn't it wasn't very spiky, so I expect it to slide down under 750 over the next week. The last one is Morphite, and we've stayed relatively stable. Again, we're still seeing the anemic volumes that we've been seeing for the last few months. I don't think there's much more to say about it. There's no reason to think it won't stay at the price it is now, unless demand suddenly spikes. Moving on to fuel, and this one should be slightly more interesting. I had remarked, so let's talk about nitrogen isotopes. I had remarked last week that nitrogen was showing a positive slope, which was kind of counter what I expected. I expected it to stay largely flat, and we saw right after the show it took a big jump down, and it's sitting instead of at 840, down at about 820. As those prices come down, it's gonna come out for the industrialists, but it's such a small change. I don't think it's gonna wash out for very much. I expect steady state to be at about that 820 mark. So if you can get it below 820, I think that's a bargain. If you end up paying 840, I think you might be getting screwed. So just keep it in mind. Things are the indicators say it's going to stay relatively stable, but my indicators aren't extremely strong for this kind of thing. Moving on to fuel, we see the market has stayed relatively stable. I've got these low outliers that I really need to figure out how to clean up. And we're seeing the same motion that we saw in the isotope. We're sliding down slightly. The prices are coming up in the last couple of days, but I expect it to start sliding again after Sunday. So just keep that in mind. Moving on to oxygen, this one was the one I expected to stay on an upward slope. I had expected last week that we would be trending towards 800 this week. But just like nitrogen, we lost a lot of momentum. It came back down under 750. Again, same thing I said for nitrogen. I expect the price of oxygen to keep climbing to a steady state of 800. So this one I would rate as a buy. If you can get oxygen isotopes under 750, I think that's a deal. I think that they're trending towards a price of 800. Right now, the indicators are kind of weak still. If we look at the MACD, it's sort of flagging that we're going to be turning around in the next day or so. But we'll have to see until next week. I don't have a really strong prediction about where this is going. Galente fuel blocks have been kind of unstable. They've been doing these weekend spikes and then weekday falls. No reason not to expect a slight uptick over the next weekend, but I expect it to slide down towards 15K over this next week. So it might be a good chance to buy up Galente fuel blocks on Tuesday or Wednesday this next week. I would keep an eye out for those. Moving on to helium isotopes for Amar towers, we're trending down under 700. I think that under 700 these are a deal. I don't expect them to go much lower than 700. So this general weakness I think is a good chance to go buy up some helium isotopes if you're using them. Amar fuel blocks, we're seeing again the same weekend warrior spike and fall. No reason to expect anything different, just that the spike might not be as high this week as last week. Last, talking about hydrogen isotopes, we are on a trend line to 600 in the next couple of weeks, and I kind of think that's a little too weak. 650 seems like a steady state to me. I think a lot of these ice products under 700 is a little bit weird. Just because that's some really freaking terrible ISK per hour if you're mining it. So I don't know what's going on here. Hydrogen is the hardest one for me to predict because I don't know who consumes it in the largest quantities. But Minmatar fuel blocks, again, are doing the weekend warrior thing. We're coming up to 15K. I think this would be a great chance to sell or build if you can get them out at 15K. I expect them to slump back down to 14,500 over the next week. Moving on to outlier analysis, my personal favorite part of the show. One moment. My personal favorite part of the show. We're going to talk about Moon products to start, because Moon products have been so... Usually I wouldn't be highlighting Moon products week over week over week like I have been, but they have just been acting so weird for the last 6 or 7 weeks, where we keep seeing these one product spikes that come through, and they take a lot longer to decay than I would really expect them to. This week, we're seeing the spike on hypersynaptic fibers. If you are in the business of making them, it would be a great chance to go make some. If you are in the business of consuming them, though, I would expect them to stay above 8,400 for the weekend, and above 8,200 for the week. I don't expect them to be back at 8,000 for 2 weeks. So bad news there. Good news, it's in a hilariously unstable point right now. Bad news is we don't see the decay go very fast. Phenolic composites is a great example of this behavior, where we see it spike high into this overbought territory, and these prices up here are extremely unstable. It doesn't become stable until we cross under 1,700. But it took an entire weekend and then some to get under that line again, and it took almost 2 weeks to decay back down to almost 1,500, which is still almost 2K higher than it was the last steady state. And then it spiked right back up again. Again, I think buying above 1,700 is a bad deal. If you can get under 1,600, you'd be doing really good there. I don't have any really great news for those industrialists who need phenolic composites, because, like I said, this decay takes twice as long as I was expecting it to take. So buckle in and try to minimize the damage here. I still think that these prices are overly high, that we really should be at sub 1,400, but I won't complain because I happen to be making phenolic composites, so make hay while the sun shines. Another one that has been interesting, and I didn't expect it to. I should have just put it on my speculation list last week. We've been seeing for the last 2 weeks this hot spike and then quick decay into another hot spike and quick decay, and we're heading into yet another hot spike. And so it's looking like if you timed your delivery to market right, you'd be able to make some serious buck off of reacting silceramic fibers. Again, past performance, future results. This is a really risky sort of prediction to be making, where, oh well, all you have to do is wait 10 days and then it pops again, and then wait another 10 days and it pops again. So if it repeats a fourth time, then I'll give some credence to it. It's not a bad bet, it's just still a risky one. So keep that in mind. Silceramic fibers. Another one that has been interesting, we've seen a lot of the metamaterials, the racial metamaterials have been spiking. Terahertz in this case for Amar spiked pretty hard, and I think that has to do with the recon changes announcement, but we're seeing a huge drop off back to the 10K mark. I think this particular dip is much lower than usual, so if you're watching right now, I would buy some and hold on to them for at least a couple of days. I do expect it to come back to this 11,000 mark. I just don't know when. I think that this drop is way too hot, and we should be seeing it rebound at least to the 1100 mark in the next couple of days. Another interesting one that flagged for one of my high price flags was platinum. I had brought it up a couple of weeks ago for this hot spike, saying that this was temporary and not a real thing, and we saw it decay back down with a little bit of instability. But then all of a sudden we've gone from 2600 to 3600 and spiked back down. I don't know what to tell you about platinum in general. I don't know why it's being constrained. But it might be getting to a price point where you might want to start thinking about alchemy or another platinum replacement. I think these prices are still way too high. I think that we should be in the 25 to 2500 to 3K mark. I think we should be at like 2750. But the prices are extremely high. I don't think they're going to decay for another week. Just keep it in mind. Next, on the PI front, we've been seeing another interesting trend where we've been rotating through the various top-end PI products where they spike extremely hot and then decay relatively slowly. So, if you are in the business of P4 reactions, or you've been looking for a way to do a little bit less clicking in your PI chains, I would start looking at P4 enrichment. You can't really do it in high sec because of taxes, but get a decent low sec, try a barren planet in low sec with no taxes. This becomes extremely lucrative. And especially if you're able to ride out these spikes, I think that there's a good way to go from self-sustaining to well off using a P2 to P4 enrichment scheme. Another P4 that is flagging is sterile conduits, and again, this spike is extremely hot. The statistics say that it should pop right back down to 10K. The behavior over the last few weeks says that it might stay above 12K for the next week. So, again, if you're in the business of PI, if you have maybe $1 billion to go throw at the problem, high-grade enrichment, I think, might be worth the investment and investigation, because I think we're seeing some constraint in the POS and SOV equipment supply chain. Another PI product, P2 here, of BioCells, has been spiking. I expect it to come back down under 9K, but because the spike is rather hot, this one would be an easy one for someone who's doing a normal P0 to P2 enrichment scheme. These, I don't know where to tell you if they're going to stay high. I know a lot of people tend to react their own, and so this might be anomalous and not actually representative of anything, but keep an eye on it if you are in the P2 business. Also in P2s, we continue to see mechanical parts are high. Again, if you're not producing P2s, or if you're not producing biocells or mechanical parts, you should probably look into doing either. These would be good places to go spend your time. And then another really interesting one is guidance systems, which are a P3, just like robotics, have done a huge spike and have been for a while above the overbought line, but have recently come back down. I think they're in their reasonable steady state. These are going to go into drones. They're higher than usual. It's a good chance to go make a few extra bucks. Robotics are also trending high, but we're also seeing that sort of weekend behavior of hot on the weekend, cold on Monday sort of behavior. So if you need robotics, I'd hold off until Monday to buy them. And if you are if you're a trader, I would also think about buying them on a Monday, selling them on a Friday. So that might be actually worth your time. Moving on to ships, I talked about the Legion 2 weeks ago because of this hot spike, asking if maybe there was a meta change, and we've seen it come down off that hotspot. I think they're slightly undervalued currently. I think they need to go up just a few percentage points back up to this trend line they were at. I want to say 220 million. They look to be at about 210 million, so there should be some room to grow over the next week, 2 weeks there. The Caldari Navy hook bill has been trending down, and I think there's two things here for the Caldari Navy hook bill. Is that one, the Confessor is a popular alternative to a meta that the hook bill fits into. And two, it looks like Caldari Navy faction warfare guys are doing a big LP dump. As far as I can tell, they don't have very high warzone control, which is kind of a weird spot to be doing your dump. I guess they're in tier 2. Maybe. Yeah, they're in tier 2 at the moment. It's not a great place to be dumping loyalty points, but there we have it. We're seeing a trend down, and we'll see a few more as we go through the data. Like here we have the Caldari Navy large shield extender, and they've been on a downward slope for the last week or so. I expect them to keep being on that downward slope. This would be a good chance to buy and hold for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, waiting for them to come back up to the, I can't tell if that's 40 or 400 million mark. They should be able to come up about 10 or 15% from where they are now. Trends say it's turning around soon, but we'll see how that goes. The data cores that come out of faction warfare are also all low. So that's graviton physics, rocket science, and quantum physics. We've seen we saw a huge spike with, I want to say, Phoebe, where they changed the invention recipes. Rhea, I think. I don't remember. They changed the invention recipes to require a lot more graviton physics, and now we're seeing that undersupply finally pop, and now they're in an oversupply. So if you were a drone builder, now's the time to get your graviton physics data cores. Also, if you need rocket science or quantum physics, these would be the time to buy. I don't know if it's ever going to come back to the 200k mark. Caldari Faction Warfare would have to basically cut about 20% of what they're dropping on the market for it to come up that high. And I don't think they're going to do it. I don't know if this is like an alliance cashing out. It's kind of weird that everywhere is popping at the same time. Moving on, let's talk about the Centus X-Type Armor EM Hardener. This one was a bit of a weird one that came up in my analysis. As a review in Rhea, or maybe the one before it, there was a change to the C1 through C3 exploration sites where they were spawning null dead space sites. And this has led to a general downward trend in some of the sexier Dead Space modules. But in the last week or so, we've seen a huge drop off on the X-Type Armor EM Hardener. So it still looks like we're north of it's either 1 billion or 100 million. My scale on the graph kind of sucks. I think the price is lower than expected, but I don't know if it's coming up, is my problem. So if you're in the market to buy them, if you wanted it for a shiny ship, this would be a great chance to go buy one. I know it's an EM hardener, and who really needs an EM hardener, but if you need one, buy one. If you're looking to speculate, I would hold off because I can't tell if it's coming back up. Moving on, another favorite to talk about in the last few shows has been the pirate implant sets. So that's the slaves and the snakes have been the two sets I've been watching rather closely. And this week, high-grade slaves are up, and they're up rather strongly. I don't know. So we're looking at the high-grade slave Omega implant, which is up about 10%, maybe even 20% over 2 weeks ago. And I think the price is poised to turn around in the next few days. So if you've bought some, sell them. If you're looking to buy some, you might want to wait. Also, the high-grade Epsilon slaves have been coming down, so it might be a good chance to buy up the Epsilon in your kit before it turns back around to head towards the 650 million mark. I don't have information on the rest of the slave set, but these were the two that pinged for behaving weirdly. Another weird, we're going to chalk this one up to just being extremely weird, is the 1000 Arum token. And so if you're not familiar, one of the services you can consume using Plex is you can convert Plex into Arum. And that means that Arum and Plex should be married at the hip, is what we'd expect, because it should be a 1-to-1 value. Is that if you see 1000 Arum and you know that you get, I think it's 2400 Arum from a Plex, then you should expect that it should be roughly the half price of Plex, or even a little bit lower. But lately it's been taking a sharp dive down in the last week. So if you're in a speculating mood, this might be a good chance to buy some. I don't know about how much volume really moves, so you may not be able to buy a whole lot of it, but I expect it to come up at least 10 to 15% over the next week or so. So this one I'll be keeping an eye on. I think that the signals are very strong here, but it's a really risky product to be investing in. So just keep that in mind. And then the last one, and this one's just because it's cute and I thought it was funny that it highlighted, is an item called boots.ini. I want to say it was a Christmas present, not from this last year, but the year previous. And if you don't know the story, what happened is that on one of the big patches, back when we did it twice a year, somebody at CCP screwed up the Windows updater, and instead of giving an absolute relative path that said, okay, we'll go to C program files eve boot.ini, they accidentally destroyed everyone's boot.ini file from Windows, which means that they bricked a whole bunch of Windows machines, and it was this huge freaking problem, and it was an enormous mess. Thank God mine didn't actually get affected by it, but it was this huge, 2-week-long affair to get everybody fixed, and the game was down for an extra 2 or 3 days. And then as a joke, to sort of commemorate it, last year they had this boots.ini boots. They're on the way up. I think they're coming back down again really soon. I just thought it was funny that these flagged, and it was a good chance to tell a good story. So no investment advice on this one. I just wanted to tell a story. Moving on, let's talk about last week's predictions really quick, and sort of keep track of the things we've been tracking week over week. First has been the problem child of the recon speculation has been the curse. We saw that right after the changes were announced that allow it to be descan immune and had a bonus, extra bonus to its NOS and Newt, we see that it came up. Producers caught up, and it came down, and it came down again, and I gave it a buy rating last week, or 2 weeks ago, and then it's been tracking back up. Now, I don't think it's going to track up much higher. I think it's actually going to fall back down to 160 million, but I think it's going to take a little while to get there. I think we're going to see a nice exponential slide out to 160 million. We may even see it stay relatively stable at the 175 million it is at right now. It's going to be a bit of a bumpy ride for the next few days, but I think that most of the action is done. And if you did buy up and you did make a few bucks, I would love to hear about it, because being right on this was an accident, to be completely honest. Moving on, the Pilgrim, which also got the NOS and Newt bonus, but not the D-scan immunity. We saw that it popped up really high, dropped back down when producers caught back up again. We saw another spike, and it came down again into the dumps, but it's been trending back up again. And I'm going to give this the same rating I just gave the Curse. I expect it to slide back down to 150. It may even go a little bit lower than that. I think most of the action on these recons is over, but you might see that producers oversupply one more time, and this might drop the price down again into this dumps and bring it right back up to 150. But I would base any speculation on selling it at 150, so just keep that in mind. The Eris we highlighted last week as having this big hot run up, and we've seen it quickly pop down into a much lower territory. I expect this to recover. I just don't know when. It might be in another state of oversupply, so it might take another week or so, but I expect it to be right back at its steady state we were seeing for the last month or so before the bubble. Another one I had predicted was going to come up rather significantly, that we were going to see a pop down. I expected to see a higher spike back up again, up above to about, let's say, 1,050 million-ish. I expected it to go slide back up there. Didn't happen. We're still sitting at like 1,025 million, sort of. So, I don't know what to say about this going forward. I still think the price is too low. I just don't know when it's coming back, and it might still be in an oversupply state. Another one we've been tracking has been the Caldari large control towers. We saw this big hot spike last week, but we've come back down again. I think we're even a little bit low, especially after two of the P4 components that go into this spiking as high as they have. I think this is a great chance to buy in, but I don't know when you'll be able to cash out because the volumes here are not very high. Another one that I brought up last week as a buy rating was the Capital Inefficient Armor Repair Unit. And I gave this a buy rating for anyone who was looking to pimp out their capital, thinking that this level was where we were going to level off. It proceeded to fall another 5%, so I'm sorry I didn't get you the best deal out there. Honestly, I think we're leveling out at the spot we're at now. I don't have any good predictions about going much higher or much lower, in all honesty. With the predictions out of the way, let's talk about CSM rather quickly. I'm going to go ahead and endorse up to 6 CSM candidates, and what I'm looking for in candidates to earn this endorsement is a pro API stance and someone who's looking to enable enablers. I know there's a lot of people who have new player focus or nullsec focus or maybe industry focuses, And those are all good, and I think they're going to be important in the upcoming CSM 10 term. But for my buck, for my gameplay, for this show, I'm going to find the best CSM candidates to that will help make the show better, that I believe can make the show better in the long term. So my first endorsement goes to Sugar Kyle. She's a longtime friend. We chat on Google Chat rather frequently. I love her blog. If you haven't read it, it's Low Sec Lifestyle. I think she's done an excellent job on her current CSM term. I think she will continue to do an excellent job going forward. She's extremely easy to get in contact with, and she is extremely open to working with players and finding out what the best solution going forward is. The other one that's on my ticket at the moment is Steve Ranukin, and you might know him from the tweet fleet as Fuzzy Steve. He is the dev candidate, and there's no way I cannot endorse him. He knows his way around industry. He knows his way around development. He's been instrumental in being a front face towards CCP for Crest development. As a dev, as the show requiring as much code and dev work and data streams, I have to support Steve. I think he's done a great job. I think he'll continue to do a great job. I'm also, when we get a little closer, like when the voting opens up, I will also be doing a wall of shame of people who I think are extremely bad candidates, and I'm going to go ahead and try and keep that to people who I think might win a chair and who I'd prefer wouldn't. If you think that's being too petty, I'd love to hear your feedback. So a couple more notes on the CSM thing. One, I still have 4 slots to fill, so I'd love to hear from candidates or constituents who believe that any candidate might be worth endorsing here on the show. I'm more than happy to go research them or talk to them if they're willing to get on Mumble or listen to the interviews. I'm willing to keep an open mind on this one, and keep the channels for communication open. And then number 2, I strongly encourage everyone who listens to this show to listen to the Cap Stable interviews. So far, I've only heard 2 decent interviews, and that was Sugar Kyle and June. I'm forgetting his name. I thought they were both good interviews, and I thought they'd both make good CSMers. But then the rest of the ones out there were more interested in pushing a features and idea agenda, which I think is not the position of CSM. So just keep that in mind. We'll be talking about more CSM stuff at the end of the shows over the next few weeks during the show. So we'll have more time to talk about this in the upcoming weeks. I want to hear from you guys. I'm more than happy to add more people to the list here, and I think it's important to vote. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close up the show. I'm going to go tease the same violence report I've been teasing for, 6 weeks now. We're still working on it. It's getting there. I'll have more information as it becomes available. We're finally getting the data to come through. We just don't have the modeling or the graphing figured out yet. So that's been this week's Eve Prosper Market Show. I'm your host, Lockefox. Thank you to everyone who tuned in live on Twitch at HLib Industry. I'll be answering questions after the show for about 30 minutes. If you aren't able to watch the show live, always remember you can catch the show on YouTube at youtube.com/EveProsper. You can get in touch with me on the tweet fleet at HLib Industry. And I encourage everyone to get in touch with me on the tweet fleet because we're starting up a new Slack channel so you guys can come talk to me that's not on the show. And we can go communicate and hang out in a more casual setting. I've been your host, Lockefox. It's been another great show. I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream and restart it, and we should be up and going for Q&A for the next about 30 minutes. So hang tight. I'm going to stop the stream, and I'll be right back.